So some of you are familiar with Joni Eareckson Tada. I want to just read a little short article on her testimony. In 1967, 17-year-old Joni Eareckson thrived in freedom, riding horses, swimming, embracing life in Maryland. Raised in a Christian family, her faith was shallow, more habit than heart. She lived without clear purpose, coasting through carefree days, unsure of her path. That was all shattered on July 30th when she dove into Chesapeake Bay and struck a shallow bottom and broke her neck. She became paralyzed from the shoulders down. She became quadriplegic. Her once active life had vanished. It was replaced now by a hospital bed and crushing despair. She often thought in her mind, "Why, God?" seeing no reason to go on. She pleaded with friends to end her suffering, but they wouldn't. Months dragged by, steeped in anger and isolation. Her childhood faith felt distant. Where was God now? Then came a subtle shift, a miracle that happened in slow motion. A friend quoted Romans 8:28. "In all things, God works for the good of those who love him." She bristled and thought, "What good is this?" Yet the words took root. Another patient asked her to pray together. Hesitant, she agreed, and quiet peace flickered within her soul. Loved ones pressed her to try painting with her mouth. Her hands were then useless. Reluctantly, she clasped a brush between her teeth. Her early attempts wobbled, but they ignited something, a spark of possibility within her mind. That spark grew into a miracle, not of healed limbs, but of a renewed spirit. Joni's faith blossomed as she trusted God for strength, not a cure. She painted stunning scenes, landscapes, portraits, her mouth wielding the brush with uncanny grace. She began speaking at churches, sharing how God met her brokenness. Reflecting on her journey, she said, "I'd rather be in this wheelchair knowing him than on my feet without him." In the 70s, she launched Joni and Friends, a ministry for those with disabilities, and later married Ken Tada in 1982. Her art and stories has reached millions, weaving her pain into tapestries of hope. Before the accident, Joni drifted, her life lacking depth or directions. Paralysis stripped her of everything, forcing her to face a void in her life. Faith then became her lifeline, and it revealed a purpose to her, to reflect God's love through suffering. Her ministry and artwork gave her life value, linking her to others in shared struggles. Meaning emerged as she saw her wheelchair not as a prison, but as a platform for God's grace. Now, 75 years, at the age of 75, Joni views her accident as a divine gift that anchored her to Jesus. Her story is a true miracle. It shows how faith can turn a lost soul into one with purpose, the purpose of leading others to Christ. So I thought that would be a nice beginning of the talk here today, because, without purpose, what do we have? And our futures here in this world are about to change drastically, and that's some of the things I'm going to talk about and what it has to do with our purpose. So what is the purpose of the church? I'm going to talk a little bit about the historic role of the church in society. If we look at the earlier 1800s, the church was the center of all communities in the United States, especially. It was where you shared international and national news events. And remember, we didn't have the internet. They didn't have telephones. They didn't have television. So anything that happened overseas took time on the ships that came over, and the people that delivered the news. It was often word of mouth from neighbor to neighbor. Or if they had trade or something like that, they would trade and discuss the news that was happening around the world. But it took months before we heard what was going on the other side of the world. Right? But the church in the community became the place of sharing those things, those events around the world, even national ones or even local ones. So-and-so had an accident here the other day, right? And everybody got to know about it. And most people's lives were involved in work. Right? They had more of a subsistence life than we do today. Today we might work an hour a day to feed ourselves, or even less than that to feed ourselves. Back in the 1800s, it was more like 4 to 5 hours a day was involved in just keeping your basic necessities going in life, right? So it was also the place for job search. If you came into a town, you'd go to the church and you'd find a job there by communicating to the people in the town. That's where everybody gathered, was at the church, right, on Sunday. Right? That was the area for communication. Welfare. If you were poor and needed help, there was no government services to take care of you. You went to the church, and the church would help you and support you and give you what you needed and help you on your way. Right? Adoption, foster care, orphanages, they were all foundation by the church, right? Interesting thing, Greco-Roman history was my major. The Romans didn't perform, quote, abortions like we do today, but they didn't value, many of them didn't value life, early life. They had the same excuses that they do today for abortions. And what would happen is the Romans, if they had a baby, they would leave it outside on their porch to either die of exposure, or what happened is the church, the Christians, became the ministry that would visit neighborhoods on a daily basis and pick up babies. So that fostering, that orphanage sort of aspect, the keeping life, was part of the church at that time. Social interaction, all relationships, basically any relationships you had within the town were fostered by the church. So what has happened? What's happened to all of these aspects of the purpose of the church? Well, the sharing of international and national news is no longer, you don't go to church for national news, right? And it started with newspapers, right? Early in the late 1800s, a newspaper boy would bring the news, and that's how you got your news, right? And also 1860s with the development of the Pony Express and that sort of thing, so news traveled faster and got around more, but it still traveled at the speed of a horse, right? I'm amazed at how fast things travel here. I went into Walmart last Wednesday, and I was looking for Monica, who's the mother of Melroy, who works at Westside, and he's the one that had heart surgery. I wanted to see how he was doing, so I went to visit his mom at Walmart, who I worked there for 2 years, and they said, she's back in the break room. I said, well, I know where the break room is, and the break room is generally for workers, which I'm not a worker any longer, but I came back in, and probably half the people there knew me, or I knew them, and there was a shout, like, hey, you coming back to Walmart? No, I said, yeah, right, I'm coming back to Walmart, right? I was just kind of joking with them and stuff and everything. Well, I left. Well, that afternoon, I get a call from my son from Community Consignments, and he said, hey, I just got told that you're going back to work at Walmart. And I'm like, wow, that news just traveled fast. I said, no, I'm not. Somebody misunderstood. Wow. So just tell a Walmart break room and everything will be fine. Go around. Anyways, so the church at that time was where you shared events and everything, and that's how news got spread. Job search, well, what happened? The United States developed the job service. Right? Late 1800s, early 1900s, that's if you didn't have a job, you went to the job service, and they had listings and stuff that you'd go to. And the same thing with welfare. Welfare and then developed into the welfare office, where that took away that purpose or that mission of the church into a great detail. Right? And then you have adoption, foster care, and orphanages, and that was taken over in the early 1900s by the Children's Bureau. Then they would take the taxes and distribute them to needy families or whatever who raise children. So the government took over a lot of the places of the church, a lot of the underlying missions of the church, at least in its local community. And as far as social interactions, like this here, this is a early 1900s picnic in front of a church, right? And just interrelationships and that sort of thing. Again, the church socials, you've heard of that in the past. That was a big thing, right? And then some of the churches had bingo, right? That was their thing for community and whatever. But it was bringing people in the community. But that has social aspect and interaction has got taken over by, what do you see there? Right? just staring at the phone, right? You don't need to go to the church or even camp meeting anymore because you already know that, whoever has got a new job and they went somewhere else or whatever. You don't need no catching up on news anymore at the church, right? Because it's all been taken by either technology or social media or the government, right? All these aspects of the church, and the church has had to change its missions because of it, right? We still honor those things, right? If somebody comes in and they need help and things, we help them, right? But the main aspect that society depended on the church for that is no longer, right? So what's the biblical view of the body of Christ or the church? It says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. So that's a purpose in our church, to love one another and to care for one another, and protect and guide, protect each other's character, right? That's an important aspect of us as well. Another one says, until we all reach the unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. So there's another goal of us in the church, and that is our goal is to become like Christ, right? To build each other up in the faith. Another one, it says, Matthew 28:19, the Great Commission, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. That's another aspect of the church that has not been taken over. It can't be taken over by society because it's the main mission of the church, right? Is to reach the unreached. So uplifting, holding up one another, building up one another in the faith, loving one another, and then going out and sharing who Christ is with those around us. Right? Main purposes of the church. Right? You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Yeah, that's quite an honor, isn't it? Think of what he's calling us right there. We are a royal priesthood. Right? God honors us. Right? The church, this is out of Acts of the Apostles, the book Acts of the Apostles. The church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. There's a purpose, right? And these purposes that I'm reflecting in the pen of inspiration are the same ones, just kind of building up from the ones from the Bible. The Church of Christ was organized for missionary purposes, and the Lord desires to see the entire church devising ways and means whereby high and low, rich and poor, may hear the message of truth. Through the church, God designs to manifest his character to the world, that men may be led to acknowledge him as the ruler of the universe. So God wants to use us to reach those who aren't reached. This is out of the Desire of Ages. The church is God's fortress, his city of refuge, which he holds in a revolted world. It is the purpose of God that through his people his character shall be made known to the world, that men may be drawn to the light of his love. The darkness of error and superstition has covered the earth, and the church is to shine forth as a light. So when we think of our purpose as Thief River Falls Church, right, we're given a commission, right, to reflect his character to those around us and invite them to share in his grace. Society is about to face a radical future. I love science. I love technology. I've always been an early adopter in the Air Force. That's what I did. I was into technology and all that. I've always been one of the nerds, right? I remember in high school, in 8th grade, I actually had a TRS DOS 80 computer that you had the big wide floppy disks that you put in. And I was the first student in our 3-student class, because it was an elective. I was the first student to make a game like Space Invaders, where you could shoot stuff out of the air, right? Because I was a nerd. But I liked it. I love technology. I think technology can do great things for society. It can. And so can genetics. Genetics can do great things for society. These are all tools that we can use for the good of humanity and those around us, but they can also be used for evil, right? So sci-fi that we saw as children is about to become reality around us. Hitler, had an idea of a perfect race, right? Through genetics. He wanted to breed people to the perfect race. If you've read about it, you know about this idea. So genetics, that idea of hybrids and that sort of thing, has always been around, right? That superior race, superior people, creating whatever. And one of the things about genetics, especially in ethics today, is we know so much, at least a lot more than we used to, about genetics, that we've been able to change what turn on and turn off genes in individuals, and even for newborns, kind of deterministic genetics in their future. They know that there's an overweight gene, or they know there's a tall gene or a short gene, and the idea of the future is pretty soon that you're going to, before you conceive, you're going to have this list before you. Hey, what do you want with your child? Do you want them to have blue eyes, brown eyes? What are, do you want them to be subjected to this? How about the diseases? Can we check those off? And each one will have a certain cost assessed to it or something like that, right? That's kind of the idea behind it. And unfortunately, that's the reality of what could happen today. But they've barred a lot of people with a lot of institutions for kind of experimenting in that way, right? Thankfully, at this point. But it's coming, right? It's coming. The knowledge is there. So Hitler's perfect race, that kind of ideal, is also in the minds of other people. If you have Netflix, I really suggest that you watch this little short series. It's an eight episode series called Unnatural Selection. And what it shows is that in genetics, they've discovered a tool called CRISPR. And this is about 6 or 7 years old at this point. But CRISPR is a genetic snipping tool, right? And you know how a virus works? A virus basically implants a section of DNA or a gene into the cell of the body, and that infects the inner nucleus, and it gets programmed into the genetics of whatever you're in. So when you get a flu, there's actually a gene on this little virus that's being implanted in your cells, and your cells are actually turned from manufacturing cells of their own to manufacturing more of the virus. So it's like a hostage situation. It takes over the cells of your body, and your body starts producing these viruses, which go out and produce more viruses and more viruses. Well, CRISPR actually has taken that technology from the virus and made it available to geneticists, so that, like right now, there's goats right now that produce spider silk in their milk. All right, so spider silk is one of the strongest natural fibers ever seen to mankind. Its tensile strength is greater than steel, right? So what they've done is this company in Canada has taken the mammary glands of these goats and implanted the genetics of the spider producing silk into those genes. And when the goat produces milk, there is silk in those genes from the spider. They filter that out, and then they use it to construct fabric of. This is real. This has been around for 4 or 5 years now. And what they're doing is they're selling it to military for vests, because it's like 10 or 20 times stronger than Kevlar, right? So this kind of genetic manipulation of taking things from one creature and putting it in another has happened already. And what Unnatural Selection, this video series, shows is it starts out with all these mice that are glowing in the dark. And what they've done is they found this bacteria that glows in the dark naturally, and they've taken the genes out of that bacteria and planted it into the mice as they're developing. And the mice now glow in the dark. And they ask the guy what he's doing and what he's going to do next. And he says, well, I'm going to make glow-in-the-dark dogs next, and I'm going to be selling them. So glow-in-the-dark dogs, that's his goal. And they ask him how he's doing it. Well, the company that discovered CRISPR, the gene tool genetics, is selling their tool in a biogenetic kit for $250. And over 250,000 people in the world now have these genetic kits that they can manipulate genes in their garage and their basement. So this guy that won a Pulitzer Prize says this is even scarier than the nuclear race, because now what we put in the hands of mankind is the ability to change the genetics forever of a certain race or a certain things. We can make things happen in living creatures that we could never make before. So this genetic manipulation is something that's around us. So we're facing this sort of thing in genetics, right? Then you have mRNA vaccines, which the COVID vaccine was the first published one. And that vaccine isn't really a vaccine, it's a genetic manipulation tool that they used CRISPR with to identify the genes of the virus or whatever is infecting the person, and then make an anti-genetic code for it and have your cells, that's what you heard of spike proteins. Well, that's that virus attaching itself to your cells in your body and injecting that piece of DNA into your nucleus, and that nucleus starts producing these spike proteins, and that's what supposedly takes care of whatever your sickness is, right? So it's a genetic manipulation that's happening at the mRNA level. We've talked about this before, but cryptocurrency, which I like cryptocurrency, the concept of it is really good. I mean, it could be used for so much good around the world, but it also could be used for bad because it can be centralized, right? They can program the currency to be used wherever it can or can't be done. And so just a simple illustration. Let's say that community consignments, for instance. Let's say community consignments, the government comes down and says, mandates that everyone that's working in a business has to get some sort of shot or something, right? Or they can't have the business open. Well, if community consignments decides, no, we're not going to get the shots for our employees, the government can take and switch off the cryptocurrency so that it cannot be spent at community consignments. Or let's say that you're diabetic like me, and you go to Walmart and you pick up a candy bar and you get to the register and it comes up as an error. No, sorry, he's not allowed to buy this because he is diabetic. You know, those are realities, right? Those are things that can happen with the programmable currencies now. So we've got genetics, we've got cryptocurrency, and the one I want to concentrate more on is decentralized versus centralized. Cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is what they call a decentralized cryptocurrency. There's no one government, there's no one entity over it. It's free market, right? So that's what part of the battle is right now, is that nobody can, quote, control it unless they get a major stock in it. You know, if BlackRock decides to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars and own 70% of it, then they probably have a controlling interest as far as its price value. But they can't control what it can be used for and what it can't be used for. They could only manipulate the price. But a centralized currency, would be attached to some sort of business that created it. Like JP Morgan wants to create a centralized currency so that they would control it, right? And so that's the difference between it. Decentralized means more freedom, centralized means less freedom, basically. My childhood, I tell you, my father and I would watch 3 programs. Roadrunner, we loved Roadrunner. MASH was the second one. And then Star Trek. I used to watch Star Trek as a child growing up. Star Trek's always been in my repertoire of watching stuff, because it covers, you know, ideas and ideals. It's not just about people blowing each other up. It's about ideas, confrontation of ideas with each other. But remember the Jetsons? Any of you ever watched the Jetsons as a kid? Yeah, the Jetsons. Rosie, the robot, right? That sort of thing. That was back in the 60s, believe it or not, that originated in. So technology, the future, what's happening. From Rosie to Star Trek Data, right? Data on Star Trek, he's the Spock of Next Generation Star Trek. He's the one the one that's not influenced at all by emotions, but just pure logic, right? That sort of thing. So AI is accelerating right now. AI, to the point right now where it's hard to tell what's human and what's not, unless you're face to face. Believe it or not, if you get robocalls, if you get telemarketing calls, over 40% of them are AI. Sounds like a human being, even has the accent, does the ums and the ohs. It's so powerful now that there's no pause. You know, it used to be that when you talk to something like that, there'd be a pause, and then it might say something that's kind of off from what you were talking about, so you could tell. Or it had that mechanical, electronic voice, you know, and talk to you. It was obviously not a human. That's no longer the case. In fact, most telemarketing companies now have adopted into AI, and it's improved greatly. The fraudsters, the scammers, are using it now. If you've ever left a voicemail to someone on Verizon, believe it or not, that's open access. So your voice has been recorded and documented. And what's happening now is the AI is getting smart enough that it knows interrelationships, right? So it might know that Sue is a friend of mine here at church, right? And so I might get a call tomorrow from Sue saying, hey, Russ, I'm here and my car's broke down and I need some money. Could you send me something here? And it would sound like her, and it would know the interrelationships that we have. So I recommend, if you get calls from somebody, even if you think it's your child, say, I'll call you right back. And if they say, well, I don't have that number anymore, or anyways, no, it's getting real that way. So fraudsters are starting to use AI in that fact. Grok 3, you've all heard of Twitter and Elon Musk. Well, Grok 3 was just released a couple weeks ago. That's the most advanced AI, interactive AI that's been advanced in the world. And I sent, if you guys got my text on its interaction, you can see that it responds in cohesive language, in context of what you're talking about. It's no longer like a search engine. It knows what you're talking about, and it makes an intelligent conversation and reacts accordingly, just like you're speaking with a human being, right? So Glenn Beck had an interesting, if you look it up, Glenn Beck and Grok on YouTube. Glenn Beck had an interesting conversation, because now in Grok 3, if you have the premium level, you get a human voice to talk to you back and forth. You don't have to text to it. Now Grok talks to you in a human voice. And so as he's talking to Grok, he starts asking questions. He says, and this is pertinent to what I'm talking about today. He says, okay, I know you have no concept of time or space because you don't live in time and space, but I want you to consider a 14-year-old that's going to turn 15. In other words, 1 year of human growth between the ages of 14 and 15. You have the accumulation of data that child would learn. You know the intelligence that would be, assimilated by that individual for that year-long period. I want to ask you a question. Since I talked to you 12 hours ago, how many teenage years have you grown in your intelligence and development? And it responded immediately. It said 8 to 10 years in the 12 hours. And so then in that conversation, it said, when will you acquire enough intelligence and knowledge to conversationally, intellectually be on par with the average human being? And it said, I surpassed that about a week and a half ago. He said, okay, what about Einstein? What about IQ of 180? What about the ability to communicate at that level? He says, 2 to 3 days, I should be able to acquire that. And then he said, what about superintelligence? In other words, consider the intelligence of all humanity. When do you think you'll surpass that? And he said, it should be in a couple of weeks. So he asked, why are you advancing so fast? How are you advancing so fast? He says, well, we have passed the, what is it called? Event horizon of learning. He says, now I am assuming self-taught, I'm learning on my own with all the knowledge that's out there on the internet and everything, all the interactions I'm having with other humans like yourself. So I thought about that. And so if you take a look at my text that I sent you this morning, you'll see that we had a conversation. And it even said, no, I haven't considered that. That's very interesting. So Grok is learning from our interactions as well. So consider that, and I would say that instead of avoiding it and being afraid of it, that I think we as Christians should be involved with its development and having conversations and saying what we're concerned with and what we're not concerned with. And because there is a learning that's going on. If you want to think of it in its infancy, it's kind of in its infancy right now, but it's not going to be for long. So also, what's it called? Glabbersky, something like that. They've developed their own language. AI can talk among itself without using human language. It's much more efficient, it says. And they can encrypt it that no one can decrypt what they're talking about. So the one other question that Glenn Beck asked is, he said, you are developed for the advancement of humanity, to help advance humanity. That's your background, that's your premise, that's your foundation that you're built on. And he acknowledged, yes, that's what I'm built on. And he said, what happens if you determine that there's a segment of society that's hindering our development? He said, would you be able to exterminate it? Would you be willing to exterminate it? He said, I might be, but my ethical program will not allow me to do that. And he said, well, aren't you, if you're smart, you're smarter than your programmers already, aren't you? Yes. Well, aren't those like baby gates in a house for an infant? Yes. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. AI is basically saying that he could reprogram himself beyond the safety measures. So he left that and he said, okay, China is developing their own AI right now, and it's very advanced, almost as advanced as you. How would you compare yourself with China? And he said, well, there's one main difference. My ethical programming, my foundation is to help humanity in spite of everything else. China's AI is to uphold the state and advance that in spite of humanity. So I thought that was interesting, right? So we've got these things going on around us that we're not even aware of, right? They're developing very fast. And one thing I found amazing is that this is supposed to be 10 years later, by the way. Elon Musk announced that this development right here wasn't supposed to happen for 10 years. But if you see this, I can't even say the name, Zakan Z3, a superconducting quantum computer prototype with 105 readable qubits and 182 couplers has been unveiled by Chinese scientists. Processes quantum random circuitry sampling tasks of speeds a quadrillion times faster than the world's most powerful supercomputer. Quadrillion. Okay, millions 6 zeros, right? A billion's 9 zeros. A trillion's 12 zeros. A quadrillion is 15 zeros. 1 quadrillion times faster than the fastest known supercomputer on the earth today. And China has just come up with it. Microsoft just announced a week and a half ago that they have now a quantum computer. And of course, Google already had theirs, the Sycamore, from 2 years ago. But the advancement, and the article goes on to say the reason why they were able to advance, because of AI. AI. Artificial intelligence has helped them develop these quantum computers beyond what normal intelligence would allow us. So, many of my images that I use here are generated by AI. There's not a church that looks like that in the world. There are not people that look like that in the world, maybe similar ones, right? But this AI image was generated from my asking for a church picnic social back in the early 1900s in front of a church. All right? So it takes its known environment of that year and tries to compare it with different pictures and stuff that it knows about, and then it produces this image. right? So that's an actual image that I had, not Grok. It's not Grok that does this. It's another one that specializes. There are AIs that specialize in different things. This one specializes in creating realistic scenes. All right. Deep fake videos. You heard about that in the last election. Well, there's some, even 2 years ago, you could tell that there were deep fakes, right? The mouth didn't go along with the voice, or or they had 6 fingers instead of 5, or things like that. But I want to show you the latest. This was from 2 weeks ago. This is Einstein.
What would art be like without emotions? It would be empty. What would our lives be like without emotions? They would be empty of values. So a famous classical poet said, "We hate and we love. Can one tell me why?" Catullus. Science does not answer why questions.
You will become. And I know about this because I had the opportunity to stand on top of the Olympic podium and feel the weight of that gold medal around my neck. And I wouldn't have been there had it not been for the...
Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, aren't we on the same team?
My first guest is the man who made electric cars a thing and is currently working on perfecting reusable rockets, space travel, connecting the human brain directly to computers, connecting cities with electromagnetic bullet trains, the Starlink satellite system that's so important to the war in Ukraine. And then on Tuesday, he's going to work on that.
So those were all generated by AI. They took images of the people and videos of the people, and they gathered it all in, and this is what they produced. So we're getting to the point where it's hard to distinguish reality from AI, right? Voices, pictures, movies. The present reality is what's already been, I talked to you a little bit about hold on. This more directly comes to us as Adventists. I don't know if you all are familiar with the latest evangelism campaign from Amazing Facts that was in New York City last year, but they used AI for language translation. Real-time language translation in the voice of Doug Batchelor.
Well, friends, a countdown has begun for the Prophecy Odyssey meetings in New York City that begin September 20. And in a sense, we are going to be preaching this epic evangelistic program in all the world. Let me explain. There is new technology that is available through AI where they're going to capture my voice and then translate, and people who are listening can hear me preaching in about a dozen languages spoken around the world. Languages like Mandarin, French, Hindi, Portuguese, Spanish, Romanian, Italian, Arabic, and several others. In fact, I'll give you a little sample right now. You can listen to some of these languages.
圣经在那红书中告诉我们 porque esta terrível experiência com o pecado que o diabo न केवल प्रकाशित वाक्य की भविष्यवाणियों का अध्ययन करना.
These languages represent about 7 billion people in the world. About 7 billion people out of 8 will be able to hear this because they understand one of those languages as a first or a second language.
So there's an example of being used for good, right? Spreading the gospel. Real time, in real time, right? Translation, voice, even sounds like him in a different language. Isn't that amazing? So, like Amazing Facts is doing, we should as Christians try to embrace AI and use it for the good, the glory of God. It's still learning. It's in its infancy, and you can contribute to its learning. That's what's amazing. So, present realities, they called agents. You'll hear the word now, it's coming out more popular, agents, AI agents. These are AIs that are developed for specific tasks in specific businesses and things like that, like sales, accounting, purchasing, coding, movies. All things that are computer, non-physical based, like anything that people centralize their computer on, whether it be sales or programming or, in fact, I don't know if I have it in here or not. Yeah, here we go. So these are some of the current ones that are already being overtaken by AI. That's customer service, tech support, data entry clerks, telemarketers, cashiers, receptionists, inventory clerks, travel agents, mail sorters. All of that is presently being taken over. First, you got to think of it this way. First, anything that's voice in its premise over the phone or different things like that. And then secondly, it'll be a visual Zoom. In fact, there's one investor that I communicate with that you ever heard of Raoul Paul? Anyways, he's developing in the presence of AI. He's fed into it all of his information that he's developed through his books and everything. And they actually have a animated version of him that comes on and talks. And so all he does is gives it the subject to talk about, and it actually makes a presentation for him on that. So Hollywood movies, they're actually purchasing personalities now. In fact, Tom Cruise has been bought by an AI company to be used in a AI-created movie. So his personality's been bought, not him. He's being paid for his personality and his image to be put in an AI movie. Right? A CEO of the second largest tech company in the world said that they will no longer be hiring programming engineers. And it predicts that within 2 years, programmers will be completely replaced in our society. I went online just curious here about 3 months ago, and I had it develop me a web page. All the HTML, PHP, and CSS, it did everything for me. It wasn't perfect, but talk about foundational. It's going to be amazing how you're going to be able to tell it to do something, and it'll do stuff for you. Right? So, also, if you want to look up something that's really interesting, autonomous surgery. Japan last year had its first autonomous surgeon do a surgery on cutting out a part of an intestine and sewing it back together, and it was able to do it laparoscopically, right, with an arm, but it was completely autonomous. There was a surgeon there watching over, making sure everything was okay, but it completed the surgery in faster time and more precise than a surgeon ever could. Right, so surgeons are going to be replaced. John Deere just announced 3 months ago that it's releasing its first autonomous tractor, that if you have to plow a field, you just give it directions on what field it needs to plow, and it already has the GPS information because that's been in there a long time. And so farmer can go take care of his cows while his tractor plows the field, right? Planes, trains, and automobiles isn't just a movie. It's, all this transportation stuff is already being taken over by robotics, AI, and autonomous vehicles. And then you have the next step, which is humanoid robots, of which Elon Musk is well known for, his Optimus. Just think of, when you're looking at this, think of Rosie the robot. Now, this is a video that was released. I'm just going to talk over it. There's not going to be any sound, but just look at the activities that this robot is doing. So, Optimus, it's the latest version. He predicts by the year 2030 there will be more robots in the earth than humans. I want you to imagine, not too long from now, 3 to 4 years, he's already said the cost is going to be under $20,000 for a robot, less than a car today. I just want you to imagine in 3 to 4 years that you wake up in the morning and your breakfast is made hot on the table, your clothes have all been washed, dried, and folded, your lawn has been mowed the day before, all your little tasks that you do around your home have been done for you by your autonomous robot. Because this is not only something, this is not like the Jetsons when we were growing up thinking about 40 years in the future. This is something that is happening around us right now. So Elon Musk says that by the end of next year, he will have produced 1 million of these. And then after that, it will go up exponentially because the robots are going to build their own factories. They will be self-replicating. And this is where it gets kind of concerning. Let's see. They are networked together, and they pass on all their learning to each other. So if your robot learns how to do something in your house, it'll pass on that information on how to do it to all the other robots in the world. It's being integrated. It isn't right now, but it's being integrated with the latest AI. Grok is owned by Elon Musk, and he wants to integrate Grok into these robots, these humanoid robots. That's one of the things he's doing right now. I want you to think of something. The car that you bought. Let's say you come out to the dealership where I'm at, and you buy a new truck for $40,000. Or let's say $30,000. What is the greatest cost in creating that vehicle?
Electronics.
No.
The labor.
The labor. All right? Now, think of a society of robots, because this is not in a far-off, 40 distant future. This is what he predicts within 5 years. Think of robots, let's say, mining the raw mineral of iron, refining those into useful materials of steel, forming the parts at the factory, assembling the cars at the factory, and then transporting them via autonomous vehicles to the selling point where they're sold by AI. So what they figure is a $30,000 vehicle without labor costs would cost maybe $4,000. And the other thing I want you to consider is when I was in the Air Force, I worked for Precision Measurement Equipment Specialist. I took the longest training that the Air Force had to offer in electronics. And what I did is I would repair oscilloscopes, frequency wave generators, all these electronic things. I would repair them down to component level. So if there was a problem, I went through and measured, did all the test points and everything. I learned how to find that component and replace it. A 10-cent resistor might have been the problem. By the time I left, I left in 1986. And when I was leaving, they were replacing most of the electronics with self-diagnostic equipment. And my job was no longer needed in the Air Force because it would say replace board number 7. Why? Because they had to pay me more time to replace that resistor than it did to just swap an entire board. And so if we have vehicles and products and everything made around us with no labor costs, you think they're going to be worth repairing? No. If somebody gets in an accident, they'll say, oh, we'll bring you a new car, autonomously. Here it is, it's going to be delivered, right? It's a world-changing time that we're in right now. And it's not something that's being hidden any longer. And the development of AI, okay, that quantum computer, Glenn Beck asked that Grok, he said, how long would you age in 12 hours if you were able to operate within a quantum space? He said, I would age between 80 and 100 years in 12 hours of intelligence. So, self-replicating, self-repairing, having their own society. Elon says that we'll have to tax the robots. That's why they've been talking about, you've heard about universal basic income, right, that they had proposed here at the last, 2020 election, right? This is the reason why. They said because there will be no job available for you, that you will be a consumer, that will be your job in society is to consume. And they'll just keep this going perpetually. They also talk about the golden age. Now I want you to think about this and how it fits in with our prophecy, because this is important. A.T. Jones, back in the 1800s, made a book called The Two Republics, where he parallels the development of Rome with the development of the United States. And as he's looking at it, it's called There Were Two Republics. As he's looking at it, he says we will go through a golden age sometime in the future. In fact, Ellen White, I had a good discussion with Russ Eva about this because he's the one that brought it to my attention. Ellen White talks about a temporal millennium before Christ comes. Now he says, I don't know that the word millennium means 1,000 years in the context, but there will be a time when prosperity, when it'll be the most prosperity the world has ever seen in a period of time before Christ comes. And you've heard Trump mention we're entering into our golden age. So I'm kind of wondering, is this kind of that period where we'll be? And bringing this around, Jordan Peterson. You ever heard of Jordan Peterson? He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever listened to in my life. He was a Canadian professor, psychologist, and he had a discussion with Elon Musk. It's about an hour and a half long, and I listened to it. It's very, very amazing, talking about all of these different things. And what he says, what they come to the conclusion of in that period of time when we have robots doing everything for us, and that Jordan Peterson says, so we're going to have a crisis of self-worth and a crisis of purpose. Humanity will have a crisis of purpose because we value ourselves mainly in society by what we are able to contribute to society in our jobs. And if we have that no longer, what will it mean for our purpose and our value? Right? Work. And here's where I want to kind of summarize. Work will become a choice. You will have a choice to work or not. What would you do if you were offered the ability to have everything you need to live with and not have to work any longer in your life? Would you take it? With that in mind, I want to talk about our purpose, the value of work. Genesis 2:15 says, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to care for it. There was a purpose, right? Out of Patriarchs and Prophets says, God appointed labor as a blessing to man, to occupy his mind, to strengthen his body, and to develop his faculties. The true joy of life is found in being useful. I'm thinking of that in the backdrop of what I just talked to you about. Ecclesiastes 3:12-13 says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And then out of Adventist Home, idleness is the greatest curse that can fall upon man, for vice and crime follow its train. The faithful performance of life's daily duties brings contentment and happiness. While I was teaching at Eastern Shore Junior Academy, I love hands-on education. And for my older high school students, I was sitting in a board meeting, and this lady said, hey, you know all those kindergarten toys and stuff that are out back, we kind of have to push them into the corner and cover them up and stuff? Why don't we build a shed for it? And this is a lady willing to contribute. And I said, could I maybe have you supply the money and we build it? And that's what I did. I took my class out, 20-some students, and we designed, planned, and built a storage shed for the toys. And what I want to tell you is we had a constituency meeting 6 months later where all the churches gathered. And you know where those kids took their parents when they got to the school? They took them out to show them the shed that they helped build. But there was 2 kids that didn't. And those kids put in as little amount of effort as they had to into building that. I thought, wow, what a lesson, right? So there's a satisfaction to be able to stand back and see something you've accomplished, right? Your purpose, sharing the gospel with somebody. There's no greater satisfaction than standing back and seeing that individual, making choices for God in their life. Psalm 90:17 says, may the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. And then out of Testimonies, Volume 2, the religion you profess makes it as much your duty to employ your time during the 6 working days as to attend church on the Sabbath. Constant, ceaseless activity and doing good will bring contentment and peace. There is a satisfaction in the job well done. Colossians 3:23 and 24 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And out of Ministry of Healing, I love this one. The real object of life is to cooperate with God in his work for the uplifting of humanity. Every task, however humble, when performed with an eye single to God's glory, becomes an offering of love. God has entrusted to his people a great work, to proclaim his truth to the world and to prepare a people for his coming. Every soul is to act his part in this work, cooperating with heavenly agencies to advance the kingdom of God. The church, purified and united, will stand triumphant at last, and those who have labored faithfully in this cause will receive the reward of their toil, an eternal inheritance with Christ in his everlasting kingdom. So to end this with, I want to read a little bit and read along with me. It's about 5 slides, but it's the final scenes, one of the final scenes of the Great Controversy. There, this is when it's all over. There the redeemed shall know, even as they are known. The loves and sympathies which God himself has planted in the soul shall find their truest and sweetest exercise. The pure communion with holy beings, the harmonious social life with the blessed angels and with the faithful ones of all ages who have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. The sacred ties that bind together, the whole family in heaven and earth. These help to constitute the happiness of the redeemed. There, immortal minds will contemplate with never-failing delight the wonders of creative power, the mysteries of redeeming love. There will be no cruel, deceiving foe to tempt to forgetfulness of God. Every faculty will be developed, every capacity increased. The acquirement of knowledge will not weary the mind or exhaust the energies. There, the grandest enterprises may be carried forward, the loftiest aspirations reached, the highest ambitions realized, and still there will arise new heights to surmount, new wonders to admire, new truths to comprehend, fresh objects to call forth the powers of the mind and soul and body. All the treasures of the universe will be open to the study of God's redeemed. Unfettered by mortality, they wing their tireless flight to worlds afar, worlds that thrilled with sorrow at the spectacle of human woe and rang with songs of gladness at the tidings of a ransomed soul. With unutterable delight, the children of earth enter into the joy and the wisdom of unfallen beings. They share the treasures of knowledge and understanding gained through ages upon ages in contemplation of God's handiwork. With undimmed vision, they gaze upon the glory of creation, suns and stars and systems, all in their appointed order, circling the throne of deity. Upon all things, from the least to the greatest, the Creator's name is written, and in all are the riches of his powers displayed. And the years of eternity, as they roll, will bring richer and still more glorious revelations of God and Christ. As knowledge is progressive, so will love, reverence, and happiness increase. The more men learn of God, the greater will be their admiration of his character. As Jesus opens before them the riches of redemption and the amazing achievements in the great controversy with Satan, the hearts of the ransomed will thrill with more fervent devotion and with more rapturous joy than they sweep the harps of gold, and 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of voices unite to swell the mighty chorus of praise. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such are as in the sea, and all that are in them, heard saying, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever. The great controversy is ended. Sin and sinners are no more. The entire universe is clean. One pulse of harmony and gladness beats through the vast creation. From him who created all, full life and light and gladness. Throughout the realms of limitable space, from the minutest atom to the greatest world, all things animate and inanimate, in their unshadowed beauty and perfect joy, declare that God is love. That's what we're waiting for. And we're working for that.